One of the greatest misunderstandings about respect is the belief that it is earned through constant effort. We assume that if we are always available, always accommodating, always saying yes, people will naturally appreciate us. It sounds noble, it sounds generous, but human psychology often works in the opposite direction. The more accessible something becomes, the more invisible it becomes. What is always available is rarely treasured. What demands no effort is rarely respected. This is not simply a cynical observation. It is a pattern repeated throughout history, economics, and human relationships. Scarcity has always created value. Gold is valuable because it is limited. A masterpiece becomes priceless because there is only one. Time itself is precious because no one can manufacture more of it. Yet when it comes to ourselves, we ignore this principle entirely. We hand out our attention without discrimination. We offer our time to anyone who asks. We answer every message immediately. We explain ourselves endlessly. Then we wonder why people treat us as though we are replaceable. Human beings rarely evaluate value objectively. We evaluate it emotionally. Our minds rely on shortcuts. One of those shortcuts is simple. If something is difficult to obtain, it must possess greater worth. Psychologists refer to this as the scarcity principle. The less available something appears, the more our curiosity and desire increase. This principle influences markets, relationships, careers, and social status far more than most people realize. Think about the people who command the most attention in any room. They are not always the loudest. They are not always the wealthiest. Often they are the ones who reveal the least. They do not rush to fill every silence. They do not compete for approval. They are selective with their words, careful with their commitments, and comfortable allowing others to wonder what they are thinking. That mystery creates gravity. People lean toward what they cannot fully understand. Now compare this with someone who constantly explains themselves. Every decision is justified. Every opinion requires validation. Every disagreement becomes an opportunity to defend their character. Instead of creating authority, this endless availability of information diminishes it. The audience unconsciously concludes that anyone trying this hard to be accepted probably doubts their own value. This is one of the darker truths about social psychology. People often respect certainty more than explanation. They admire restraint more than excess. They remember what was left unsaid more vividly than what was endlessly repeated. Consider how nature itself operates. The strongest predators do not waste energy chasing every opportunity. They conserve their strength until the right moment arrives. There is discipline in restraint. There is confidence in patience. Desperation, by contrast, scatters energy in every direction. It announces insecurity without saying a single word. Many people confuse kindness with unlimited accessibility. They believe setting boundaries makes them selfish. In reality, boundaries communicate something entirely different. They tell the world that your time has value. They signal that your attention is earned rather than automatically given. Ironically, people often appreciate you more after you establish limits, not because they enjoy the limits themselves, but because those limits reveal self-respect. This is why constantly trying to be liked becomes self-defeating. Approval is addictive because it offers immediate emotional rewards. Every compliment, every invitation, every positive reaction provides a brief sense of significance. But over time, the need for approval transforms into dependence. Instead of making choices based on principles, you begin making choices based on anticipated reactions. Your identity slowly shifts from authentic to performative. The truly respected individual operates differently. They are willing to disappoint others when necessary. They understand that saying yes to everything ultimately means saying no to themselves. They recognize that protecting their energy is not arrogance, it is wisdom. Robert Greene often points toward a simple but uncomfortable observation about power. What people cannot easily possess often occupies their imagination. This is why silence can be more persuasive than argument. This is why absence can increase appreciation more than constant presence. When you are always available, people stop anticipating your presence because they assume it will always be there. Think about relationships. At the beginning, mystery fuels attraction. Both people are curious. They reveal themselves gradually. Every conversation uncovers something unexpected. But once one person begins giving everything immediately, constant attention, constant reassurance, constant availability, the dynamic shifts. Curiosity disappears. Predictability replaces discovery. What once felt valuable begins to feel ordinary. The same pattern appears in professional life. Employees who constantly volunteer for every task often believe they are demonstrating commitment. Sometimes they are, but if they never establish limits, their willingness becomes expected rather than appreciated. Meanwhile, the person who chooses assignments carefully and delivers exceptional work on each one often earns greater respect. Selectivity communicates confidence. Notice that none of this requires manipulation. It is not about pretending to be unavailable. It is not about playing emotional games. Artificial scarcity eventually reveals itself. Authentic value comes from having a life so meaningful that you genuinely cannot give every person unlimited access. Your priorities naturally create boundaries. This demands a profound internal shift. Stop measuring your worth by how many people want your attention. Measure it by how intentionally you invest your attention. Your attention is one of the few resources that, once spent, can never be recovered. Every conversation, every commitment, every distraction costs a portion of your life. The question is not whether people deserve your time. The deeper question is whether your time reflects your highest values. There is another reason scarcity creates respect. It demonstrates emotional independence. People are instinctively drawn toward those who appear complete within themselves. Someone who does not constantly seek validation radiates quiet confidence. They communicate, without words, that their identity is not determined by public opinion. This confidence cannot be manufactured overnight. It is built every time you resist the urge to explain yourself unnecessarily. Every time you choose silence over impulsive reaction. Every time you decline a commitment that conflicts with your priorities. Every time you protect your peace instead of chasing approval, eventually something remarkable begins to happen. People start adjusting to your standards instead of expecting you to adjust to theirs. Conversations become more meaningful because your words are fewer. Your presence carries greater weight because it is no longer taken for granted. Opportunities become more valuable because they are chosen rather than accepted out of fear. And perhaps the greatest transformation is internal. You stop fearing being overlooked because you understand that genuine value does not beg for recognition. It quietly waits to be discovered. Remember this: the world rarely respects what is endlessly available, but it never forgets what has learned the power of restraint. Once you begin to understand that scarcity creates value, another uncomfortable truth emerges. It is not enough to become less available. You must also stop giving yourself away at a discount. This is where most people unknowingly destroy the respect they are trying so hard to earn. They assume that generosity, constant accommodation, and endless self-sacrifice will make them indispensable. But in reality, when you repeatedly offer your time, your attention, your expertise, and even your emotional energy without standards, you teach people exactly how little those things are worth. Human beings are always learning how to treat one another. Every interaction becomes a lesson. Every time you tolerate disrespect without consequence, you are writing the rules of future interactions. Every time you immediately forgive behavior that violates your standards, you communicate that your standards are negotiable. Every time you abandon your own priorities to satisfy someone else's expectations, you quietly announce that your life revolves around their approval rather than your own purpose. This is rarely intentional. Most people are not trying to diminish themselves. They simply fear rejection more than they value self-respect. That fear becomes invisible because it disguises itself as kindness. It says, if I keep helping, they'll appreciate me. It whispers, if I'm always understanding, they'll eventually treat me better. But psychology offers a harsher lesson. People often respect the person who has clear limits more than the person who has endless patience. There is a fundamental difference between generosity and self-abandonment. Generosity comes from strength. It is a conscious choice made by someone who knows their own worth. Self-abandonment comes from insecurity. It is the desperate hope that enough giving will eventually purchase acceptance. The tragedy is that acceptance gained through self-sacrifice is always temporary because it depends on continued sacrifice. Imagine someone who is always available to solve everyone else's problems. They answer every call, fix every crisis, say yes to every request, and place their own ambitions at the bottom of the list. At first, they are praised, people call them dependable, they are described as generous and selfless. But over time, something subtle changes. Their effort stops being appreciated because it becomes expected. What once earned gratitude becomes an obligation. The moment they finally say no, people react with disappointment instead of understanding. This reveals an important principle. Expectations expand to fill whatever you continually provide. The more you overextend yourself, the more others unconsciously assume that this level of access belongs to them. They stop viewing your effort as a gift and begin treating it as a requirement. This is why many of the most exhausted people are also the least appreciated. They have trained everyone around them to believe that their energy has no limits. Robert Greene often points toward the invisible negotiations taking place beneath every human interaction. People are constantly assessing confidence, certainty, emotional stability, and boundaries. These assessments rarely happen consciously. They occur through instinct. Someone who constantly apologizes, over-explains, or seeks permission unconsciously signals uncertainty. Someone who speaks calmly, establishes clear limits, and refuses to negotiate their principles, communicates authority without demanding it. Think about how often people apologize for things that require no apology. They apologize for expressing an opinion. They apologize for taking time to think before answering. They apologize for protecting their schedule. They apologize for existing in a way that might inconvenience someone else. Every unnecessary apology chips away at perceived confidence. It teaches others that your presence itself requires justification. There is another behavior that quietly lowers your value, the need to explain every decision. Many people believe that if everyone understands their reasons, conflict will disappear, but constant explanation often has the opposite effect. It invites negotiation. It suggests that your decisions are open for debate. Notice how people with genuine authority behave. They are not rude, they are not dismissive, but they also do not spend hours convincing everyone to approve of their choices. They simply make decisions consistent with their values and allow those decisions to stand. This does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means becoming internally anchored. Your confidence should come from alignment with your principles, not from the applause of the crowd. One of the most expensive habits you can abandon is people-pleasing. At first glance, it appears harmless. You want harmony, you want everyone to feel comfortable, But beneath that desire often lies something deeper, the fear that disagreement will cost you love, friendship, or opportunity. Ironically, pleasing usually produces the very outcome it seeks to avoid. The more you shape yourself to fit everyone else's expectations, the less clearly anyone sees who you really are. They appreciate your usefulness, but they struggle to respect your identity. You become easy to replace because there is nothing distinctive left to protect. The individuals who leave lasting impressions are rarely those who tried to satisfy everyone. They are remembered because they stood for something. They possess standards that could not be purchased with approval or manipulated by guilt. Their consistency made them trustworthy because people always knew where they stood. There is immense psychological power in accepting that not everyone will like you. This realization frees enormous amounts of emotional energy. Instead of managing countless opinions, you begin investing in your character. Instead of chasing validation, you pursue competence. Instead of fearing criticism, you evaluate whether the criticism aligns with your values. If it does, you learn from it. If it does not, you let it pass. The paradox is remarkable. The less desperately you seek respect, the more naturally it arrives. Respect cannot be forced through performance. It emerges when people recognize that your behavior is guided by conviction rather than convenience. This also transforms your relationships. Instead of attracting people who value your endless availability, you begin attracting those who value your presence. There is an enormous difference between the two. One group wants access to your resources, the other appreciates your character. As you continue developing this mindset, you discover that boundaries are not walls built to keep people out. They are filters that reveal who genuinely belongs in your life. Those who only benefited from your lack of boundaries may resist your growth. They may accuse you of changing. In truth, you are changing, but not into someone selfish. You are becoming someone who understands that self-respect is the foundation upon which every healthy relationship is built. Every standard you establish sends a message not only to others, but to yourself. It reinforces the belief that your time matters, your peace matters, your goals matter, and your dignity matters. Over time, that belief becomes visible. It shapes your posture, your voice, your decisions, and the quiet confidence that others instinctively notice. And when that happens, something profound shifts. You no longer need to convince people of your worth, because your actions speak before your words ever do. Never trade your dignity for approval, because the respect you sacrifice today is always more expensive than the acceptance you gain tomorrow. By this point, a deeper pattern should be becoming clear. Respect is not something you ask for. It is not something you negotiate, nor is it something you can purchase with kindness alone. It is the natural consequence of perceived value. First, you learned that scarcity creates value because what is constantly available loses its significance. Then you discovered that giving yourself away too cheaply through endless approval, seeking, and weak boundaries quietly erodes the respect you hope to receive. The final step is perhaps the most important of all. You must become someone whose presence feels like an investment rather than a convenience. Think carefully about that distinction. A convenience is useful in the moment, but easily replaced. An investment grows in value over time. People protect investments. They nurture them. They think carefully before risking them. Convenience, on the other hand, is consumed without much thought. If a better option appears, it is forgotten almost instantly. The question, then, is not whether people enjoy being around you. The real question is whether your presence leaves their lives richer than before. Do you bring clarity where there is confusion, calm where there is chaos, strength where there is weakness, insight where there is uncertainty, or do you simply fill empty space with noise, attention, and constant availability? The most respected individuals rarely chase significance. They build it quietly through consistent self-mastery. This is one of the recurring lessons Robert Greene emphasizes throughout his work. Power does not come from dramatic displays. It comes from discipline that is practiced long before anyone is watching. The strongest people are often the least interested in proving they are strong. They understand that true authority is demonstrated through actions repeated over years, not through words spoken in moments of insecurity. This is why rare skills matter so much. Every valuable person possesses something that cannot be easily copied. It may be their expertise, it may be their emotional stability, it may be their creativity, judgment, or ability to remain composed under pressure. Whatever it is, they have invested years developing qualities that cannot be downloaded overnight. Notice how society responds to mastery. We admire the musician who spent decades refining their craft. We trust the surgeon whose precision comes from thousands of hours of experience. We seek advice from the leader who remains calm while everyone else panics. None of these people became valuable because they demanded respect. They became valuable because they became difficult to replace. Replacement is the hidden enemy of respect. If what you contribute can be found anywhere, people unconsciously treat it as ordinary. But when your character, competence, and consistency become rare, your value naturally increases. This is not arrogance, it is the law of human perception. There is another quality that separates you individuals from everyone else: emotional discipline. In today's world, emotional reactions have become almost automatic. A single criticism leads to outrage. A disagreement becomes a personal attack. Social media has conditioned many people to react instantly rather than think deeply. The person who refuses to be controlled by emotion immediately becomes different. They pause before speaking. They choose their battles carefully. They understand that every emotional outburst hands control to someone else. Imagine two people facing the same insult. One explodes with anger, raising their voice, defending every aspect of themselves. The other listens quietly, considers whether the criticism contains truth, responds calmly if necessary, and then moves on. Which person appears stronger? Which person seems more difficult to manipulate? The answer is obvious. Emotional control creates psychological power because it communicates independence. It tells others that your inner state cannot be easily influenced by their opinions. This is why silence often becomes one of the most valuable forms of communication. Many people fear silence because they mistake it for weakness. They rush to fill every pause with explanations, jokes, or reassurance. Yet silence often accomplishes what endless words cannot. It creates space, it encourages reflection, it forces others to reveal more than they intended. Strategic silence is not manipulation. It is restraint. It reflects confidence that your worth does not depend on constantly being heard. Equally important is selective generosity. Notice the word selective. This does not mean becoming selfish or emotionally distant. It means giving with intention rather than obligation. When generosity is offered freely to everyone, regardless of how they behave, it gradually loses meaning. But when generosity is directed toward those who demonstrate integrity, loyalty, and mutual respect, it becomes powerful. Your kindness becomes valuable because it is guided by wisdom instead of guilt. Many people spend years trying to convince the wrong people of their worth. They pour energy into relationships that repeatedly drain them. They hope that one more sacrifice, one more favor, one more compromise will finally earn appreciation. But appreciation that depends on endless sacrifice is never genuine appreciation. It is dependency disguised as affection. High-value individuals recognize this early. They invest where there is reciprocity. They understand that energy is finite. Every hour spent chasing validation is an hour stolen from becoming exceptional. This brings us to one of the greatest misconceptions about confidence. Confidence is not believing that everyone will admire you. Confidence is knowing that your purpose remains intact even if they do not. That kind of confidence cannot be faked. It develops through countless private decisions. Every morning you choose discipline over comfort. Every evening you choose growth over distraction. Every conversation you choose honesty over performance. Every setback you choose learning over self-pity. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, your identity begins to change. You no longer introduce yourself through achievements alone. Your character becomes your reputation. People begin to trust your consistency because they have seen it repeatedly. There is something deeply attractive about consistency. In a world filled with unpredictability, people naturally gravitate toward those whose principles remain stable. They know where you stand. They know your word carries weight. They know your actions match your promises. That reliability is extraordinarily rare today. Many people pursue appearances instead of substance. They want recognition before competence, influence before wisdom, results before discipline, but history repeatedly reminds us that lasting respect is always built from the inside outward. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop thinking about appearing valuable because you are fully occupied becoming valuable. Your attention shifts away from managing impressions and toward mastering yourself. Ironically, this is precisely when your presence becomes magnetic. Others sense that you are driven by purpose rather than applause. People begin seeking your opinion because you do not offer it carelessly. They appreciate your time because you do not waste it. They respect your boundaries because they recognize they are rooted in self-respect rather than arrogance. Most importantly, they value your presence because it consistently leaves them better than it found them. This is the ultimate transformation. You are no longer competing for attention. You are cultivating substance. You are no longer measuring your worth by popularity. You are measuring it by the depth of your character, the strength of your discipline, and the rarity of your contribution. Remember, the world forgets those who try to be everything for everyone, but it never forgets the person who became so valuable that their presence had to be earned. Become the investment that time cannot cheapen, and respect will stop being something you chase. It will become something that quietly follows wherever you go.